each of you can kind of weigh in a little bit on this about the kind of the advantages and some of the challenges of working with a large ensemble. We could start with Archie, just because you have the...
I mean, funny enough, everything that you were saying, definitely I feel the pressure on The Good Wife. Just as soon as you get so much dialogue, making it feel and sound completely real in the amount of time that you have. I mean, you sometimes, as you all know, get a script like the night before or a few hours before, just being able to digest that dialogue and really trying to find, trying to make it sound like it's coming from within, I think is the toughest job. I mean, doing the show for 5 years, I still find, it difficult to really make it sound authentic and real.
Our show, we get to just dance around, which is so great because it is so real and authentic. And I did Ally McBeal for a season, so
Scary, isn't it?
It's terrifying when if and or but is out of place.
In Homeland, I can actually, because it's so emotional, you find yourself throwing in little words and little things. Our writers are real minimalists on the show, and so you read a sentence and you're like, but that's not what's going on. And oh, right, I have to emote.
Do you want to know the beats of your character going forward, or is it sometimes better not to know what's going to happen?
We definitely don't get a lot of information, which can be really frustrating because each episode sometimes spans hours and sometimes just a day, and so you really want to know where you're going. And they tell us things and they say they don't know a lot of times, which I think is a big lie to just
They
keep
don't want
us
to
from
tell you
push.
in case you get disappointed that it gets cut out.
Which is, I get, but it's a drag because you obviously just want to prepare yourself emotionally. But I find also that is kind of a bullshit excuse for myself to want to know, because when I don't know, I'm really living truthfully in that moment, and I'm not anticipating what my character is going to do or what's going to happen. A good example is David Harewood, who was on our show and turned out to be a really bad guy by the end of the second season, but he didn't know, and he said he would have played that character differently, but that might have ruined the character. Right. And I find that that's sometimes better to not know.
That is the difficult. I think it's the exciting part about being on a show. It's the exciting / terrifying part of being on a show is going, okay, I'm excited to read this episode, excited to see where this character's going, but then something happens down the line in the season where you go, if I knew that fun fact about myself, then, that behavior before would have been different. To at least have it, whether or not it would have read different, on screen is one thing, but it would have felt different.
Mm-hmm. Well, I was thinking the other day that's partly what is sort of awesome and really challenging about television. Kind of what you were saying is that instead of when you're in a movie, you know the beginning and the middle and the end, and generally it's the movie takes place at the most heightened moment in that character's life, and so you kind of play it that way. And part of the challenge and the revelation for me from doing this TV show is that, yes, it's very heightened and dramatic, but it's also just another day in your life. And there's going to be another one and another one and another one. And it's sort of, you start from the beginning again every time, and you can get to these extreme points of sort of frustration or, love or passion or fury or whatever. And then it just goes, and then the next week it's sort of, there you are back again. And it's like it never happened almost. And which is kind of more like life in some ways, more like how we all experience our everyday life.
I think the biggest challenge for me for TV is how do you keep a character interesting for 22 episodes for 5 years?
And you're getting bored of the sound of your own voice.
Yeah, as opposed to a 2-hour film where you have your beginning, your middle, and your end. You know exactly what's going to happen to your character. How do you maintain that for like 5, 6 years?
You steal nail polish, you get arrested, you screw a lot of people on the show, you take your clothes off.
That's what writers are for.
Do you feel like there's better work in television now than there was, available even a few years ago?
I do. I think all of the actors that are now, we kind of got smart early on, us sitting here. I mean, we can still do, woohoo! Now we can still do film and stuff if we want, but I feel like the characters that are on TV right now are so rich, and, for us to be able to work, I don't know, I just find them to be, it's more freeing for me as an actor.
So can you talk a little bit about what you kind of learned from the Claire Danes experience last year with Homeland and how that's going to play out for you?
But I don't think it's what I've learned, it's what the crew's learned from Claire being pregnant. the way has been paved for me in a really great way. So I was a little freaked out about telling the show just because I felt this, as a woman, this sense of responsibility to my job, and I suddenly felt like, am I going to be disappointing everybody that I'm knocked up, that I'm, but life goes on and you have to live your life. And I was so nervous about telling the producers about it, and everybody was so kind to me. And Claire's laid down the groundwork, and they're really good at hiding pregnancies now. And I was actually really concerned about the emotional life that I have to have on the show, and if that would affect the baby, because I'm so unhappy on the show all the time. And I asked my doctor, I'm like, I have to cry all the time. Is that a problem? And he was like, as long as you're not crying for a reason, like for yourself, because you're unhappy, I was like, okay, fine.
If we could get each of you to just share one very quick memory related to the Emmys.
I think for me, the moment I remember the most about the Emmys is the first time I went there, where I'm sure the whole industry was shocked that I was nominated, but I remember when we went on the red carpet, there was some super famous people next to me, and I mean, the first time you go is like a fairy tale come true. You're like back at Disney World and you're 10 years old. But I remember I was all dressed up, I had hair and makeup done, I felt like a princess. I got ready to do my pose in front of these photographers, and nobody recognized me, and everybody put their camera down, and I was just, I just wanted the carpet to open up and just swallow me. It was horrible. And then I won, so I was really happy about that.
The past year, I had the blot powders, the blot papers that you had, and my friend accidentally gave me the ones with the powder on it, and so I wasn't looking, and I was doing this as I'm going down the red carpet, and somebody was like, I think you should look at the mirror. And I had white powder just all over my face, and trying there without the,
Somebody could have really written a story about that. White powder all over your face.
Oh yeah. Don't I know it?
That's really fun.
Don't I know it? I grew up in that generation.
Really
They were like, where is it?
I was just thinking my dad was a writer and a television writer, and he adapted Brideshead, revisited the, I don't know whether you guys ever saw that, years and years ago for the television. And he had one or two episodes of it got nominated, and it was, there was a little framed certificate in his bathroom, and his bath was his favorite thing on earth. That was someone. He went on this radio show once on the English radio called Desert Island Disc, and you had to choose your luxury that you would take with you on a desert island, and his was a bath. So he'd sit in the bath, and I would go and sit and chat to him in the bath, and I would always look at this thing with this. I didn't even know what an Emmy was, because we were, in England, and it just didn't. And I'm Emily, and it's sort of, I kept thinking Emmy, and he called me Emmy. Anyway, whatever. That was the thing. And then all these years later, if our show or anything to do with our show gets nominated, it will be awesome to go and feel like, somehow connected to him.
You talked about kind of shedding, disappointments, and obviously you're all, working now, which is a nice thing. But do you engage? Do you still think back on roles that you missed at all? Do you do any woulda, shoulda, coulda, and those kinds of things, or are those?
I've done that, especially when I was just doing film 15 years ago, and then I took a long hiatus that I didn't really plan, 4 years, and everyone was like, "Oh, you're the new it girl. What are you doing moving back to Cleveland?" And I remember sitting on my floor in my living room and praying, I'm like, why am I back here? I had just gone through my divorce, but I was very young when I got married, so we decided to move back to Ohio at the height of my film career, and put the boys in school there, and I was just done. I just moved back, and I just remember sitting there and just crying and going, God, this is such a disappointment. I've let my mom down, I've let my dad down, I've let my family down because I'm done. And I was just like, there has to be a greater purpose for this. And so 4 years later, I picked up and I just woke up one morning and said, I have to go back to California because I have to work and support the kids and do this. And within 3 months of being back here, I got a phone call that my father died. Why am I going to cry? So that was the purpose. sorry, just being back there for those years.
Yes.
I don't know. I feel like there's a reason behind everything we do in life, and
Have some faith.
have some faith, and having that hindsight of just like, wow, that was the reason why we moved back. And I would never, ever, ever, ever give up that time back in Cleveland with my parents and my dad, and them with my boys with my father for anything, anything, any movie, any of it. So it's kind of cool to have gotten a second chance to come back and do television and be, sitting here with these lovely women